And I am back on this side of the pond, as they like to say. Hello, everyone. I'm Trish Regan. It's the Trish Regan Show. We're coming to you live today. And again, I'm back stateside. Boy, I'll tell you, it's good to be home. It's really 3 weeks with the kiddos in a hotel room. Let me just tell you. That's how you make some family memories, ladies and gentlemen. Family memories. Anyway, all good stuff. I am definitely glad to be back, though. Home sweet home. It means something. Anyway, I came home, and what do you know? We got all these new polls that nobody else is reporting on, right? Because we know the mainstream media. The mainstream media has their script; they're sticking to it. It's Kamala all day long. She's like, oh my gosh, she's like movie star status. George Clooney might have something to do with this. Anyway, there are some polls that no one's talking about. Some stunning new polls that I want to share with you because I actually think that this is important, right? Like they just want to keep knocking them down. They want you to have no enthusiasm because that's how they felt just a few weeks ago. Let's take a look at some good news. I'm a realist. We have to be careful. But a little bit of good news coming to us from the Trafalgar Group, North Carolina. Presidential election, August 2024. How do you like this? He's ahead. He's ahead by quite a few points there. Okay, the blue is Kamala. I find that interesting. Nobody's talking about this. He's ahead in North Carolina quite a bit. Okay, let's move on to Nevada. He's also ahead pretty significantly in Nevada by an even larger margin. Again, this just coming out today. Nobody wants to talk about the good news. Well, I got some, all right? A little bit of good news. Plus, we're also seeing in Arizona. Now, this is a biggie because Arizona is one of those states that could kind of go any way. A lot of people thought that Kamala Harris was going to pick Mark Kelly because somehow Mark Kelly was going to help deliver Arizona, and she wanted that. A lot of people thought she was going to pick Shapiro because he could help deliver Pennsylvania. But no, she went with the the guy out of Minnesota that's pretty left, okay? Pretty left. We can talk more about that. And likes to lie a lot. But did you see that in Arizona? That was some good news too. I think that's fantastic to see. So you've got Arizona, you've got Nevada, you've got North Carolina, all just coming in pretty strong for him. The other thing that's really important that nobody's talking about is the Siena poll that was just out the other day. New York Times talked all about how, Trump's momentum, blah, 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 Kamala's everything, be all end all. Yet, Trump still has a 6-point lead on the issue of the economy with swing state voters. In other words, who do they trust most? It's still Donald Trump. So it is my firm belief that if he really leans in hard, and he did, he spoke with Elon about some of these big issues like the economy in the big X interview just last night. If he leans in hard to this, then he's going to pull it off. And it's not easy. It's not easy because these people are so committed, if you would, to a non-stop narrative that is growing pretty darn nauseating, shall I say, after a while, right? That's the truth of it, ladies and gentlemen. But take a listen to him talking about the issue of inflation there with Elon Musk just last night.
Well, with all of that being said, to me, that's so important, the most important. But with all of that being said, the election's coming up and the people want to hear about the economy and the fact that
Absolutely
they can't
true.
buy groceries because they don't have enough money to buy groceries. The inflation has killed them. Food prices are up 50, 60, even 100% in some cases. And this stupid administration allowed this to happen. And it's a shame. And that's the thing that people most care about, in my opinion. They care about the border a lot. And we discussed the border at great length. It's nice to have a forum like this where I can discuss something at length. And by the way, you think Biden could do this interview? Do you think that Kamala could do this interview? They would take a pass on you.
No, they could not.
So they don't need Elon. They don't need Elon screaming out questions. It's pretty sad.
It was actually a really interesting 2-hour-long discussion. The mainstream media went wild. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But consider what he mentioned there on the economy and the border. These are two big things for him. Safety, right? Personal safety. You want to make sure that your kids can go to school and have safe streets to walk. You want to make sure that you can afford those groceries every week. Well, a big part of this, by the way, is also taking some accountability for your own finances, just a little bit. I mean, the government, don't get me wrong, they're completely messed up, but I want to encourage everybody to do their part. We are thankful to our great show sponsor, American Hartford Gold, for their contribution to making sure that I can do this show for you every single day for free. Let's take a listen. Hey everyone, I'm Trish Regan, and so happy to be coming to you live all week long from the stunning island of Ireland. Just incredible. When I was a little kid and we'd visit here, my mom would say, if you're lucky enough, you might actually get a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, because that's where the leprechauns leave it. So we looked, we didn't find any, but I consider it probably having been good advice, because as I got older, I learned that gold is pretty valuable. It's valuable in terms of diversification. I encourage you to take a look at it. And when you do, call our friends, our wonderful sponsors over at American Hartford Gold. You can go to trishlovesgold.com, Trish Loves Gold, and wow, it's windy here. You can text 65532, my name, Trish, to 65532 for your chance to get up to $15,000 in free silver, ladies and gentlemen. Just a terrific offer. Indeed. We're going to talk more about gold a little bit later on in the show. But consider how aggressively the media has just been attacking. And consider what they've done for Kamala Trump. For Kamala Harris versus Trump. I mean, Kamala is just somehow, being crowned. I mean, effectively, this is like a coronation. It's like we've got the British press that has to kowtow to the King of England or something. I mean, this is really disturbing. They are giving her so much momentum, and then they're all happy because she's got some momentum. You wonder how that works. Listen, I think the American people are smart enough. They're going to see through this. We just have to hope that they see through it in time, right? Let's watch this clip of all this momentum that they've been able to generate for her, and then the pat on the back as a result.
Battleground momentum. New numbers showing the Harris-Walz ticket is gaining ground.
Vice President Harris gaining momentum.
Momentum in some key states.
This morning, Vice President Kamala Harris gaining momentum.
Gaining momentum.
But look, this momentum, keeping the momentum.
Harris's momentum.
You can't slow down the momentum.
This remarkable momentum.
Mission number one is
guys,
create the momentum.
We got it, right? All right. You're all excited about the momentum. But that's why I led the show with the other momentum, the fact that Donald Trump is still winning in so many of these polls, the fact that he still has a 6-point lead on the economy. This is the stuff that you don't hear about because they want the momentum to take off. They want you to be demoralized. Well, I have news for him. You know what? The American public is so much smarter than that, and I just don't think it's going to work. Try as they may. The mainstream media, they hate Trump so much, and they hate Twitter now so much, because of the guy that runs it, and they have no control over it, you see, anymore, that they kind of lost it when it was decided that Elon Musk and Donald Trump would do this little interview together. It was a 2-hour-long discussion, and the mainstream media was furious. I mean, absolutely furious. Leading up to the whole thing, everybody was all angry, and then, of course, coming out of it as well. Do we have these headlines? I want to show you guys, because this graphic is pretty darn amazing here. This is the mainstream media's reaction. Ooh, they're mad. Okay? They're really, really mad. How dare you have listened to that interview? If you were, you would have been one of 84 million people in real time. Those numbers will grow and grow and grow, as Elon Musk was tweeting out today. 16.4 million listened. Forgive me, 84 million views on the post. That 84 million, that was this morning, okay? That was this morning when we took that. So I guarantee you, I mean, this is just growing and growing. Forgive me, this was yesterday, I guess. So this is just growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. This is going to be massive, 84.2 million. So I guarantee you those numbers are even higher. And this is what's making them so mad. I mean, I look at them like, are you guys jealous? Is that it? It's in part jealousy, but it's more than that, you see, because now they're not going to have the kind of control that they want over the narrative. And there's a lot of money at stake. There are a lot of people that put a lot of money into these big media companies, and they expect to be somewhat rewarded in kind. And so they're going to go after this. You had the Harris campaign getting completely unhinged. They were so angry that this was going down that they sent out this email. You see that? Oh, first of all, they're soliciting for funds. Chip in some more dollars. We want your money. Right now, Elon Musk is interviewing Donald Trump live on, this is just a little petty, right? She writes, Twitter. We're not calling it X. By the way, this is not them writing it. Just in case anybody had any questions, Harris doesn't do any of her own writing. Somebody else does it for her. Same with Walz. These are not smart people. They're not going to do that in the first place because they're probably also, dare I go out on a limb and say, a little bit lazy too. So they write, or someone writes for them. It's not enough that Musk has pledged to donate millions of dollars to help reelect Trump. He's using his purchased platform, one of the largest social media sites in the world, to spread Trump's unhinged and hateful agenda to millions of users. Wow. And then they hit on the fact that these guys are rich. And so you can't like them because they are rich. I'm blown away by this. She said, Musk is using his vast fortune and broad reach to try to control our democracy. Look, I get it. It's good politics, right? It sounds good. Is it reality? I actually think that Elon Musk is losing his fortune in an effort to protect our very First Amendment. I mean, you know how much money he paid for this. I thought he overpaid at the time, but I told you that deal was going to go through, did I not? I told you it was going to go through because there was no way the Delaware court was not going to allow it to go through, even though nobody in Delaware or anywhere else for that matter that happens to be in the so-called sort of establishment class ever wanted it. They did not want Elon to own Twitter because, like it or not, even though Threads is trying to come into action, a few other things, I mean, heck, even Truth, right? Truth Social. The reality is news breaks still on Twitter. So if you're watching me on Twitter, we're streaming this live. Thank you very much. We're also streaming. I can see all those comments live on YouTube right now, as well as Facebook, everyone. So it is good to have you. I'll tell you, this is pretty darn amazing. They are jealous. They are frightened. They are worried that somebody else is going to get ahead. And I'll tell you, this happened throughout at least my lifetime. I mean, I think about every Republican candidate going back to Reagan. They've hated all of them. And they've tried to destroy them. I mean, think about what they did to Romney. Think about what they did to Bush. And now suddenly Bush and Romney, they're all on the A team, right? Because Bush and Romney don't like Trump. But remember what they did to them. It just so happens that Donald Trump is standing up to them and saying, hey, bring it on. I'm ready. And I'm going to dish it right back to you. And Elon's doing the exact same thing. So yes, they did this little interview. It went, in my estimation, really well in that we were able to hear from Donald Trump, and we heard a lot of policy from Donald Trump. And I think that's important because we don't hear that, shall we say, from the Harris campaign. We get no policy, more on that coming up. But, I will say this. When I look at the coverage, I noticed that they were really hung up on the fact that this thing got off to a rough start. So if you were following this last night, what you would see is, yes, it did get off to a rough start because you couldn't get in, right? It said it was unavailable. And so eventually they were able to fix these technical and mechanical glitches, fortunately. And when they did that, there was just, tens of millions of people that tuned in. But of course, all the media could focus on was this glitch at the top. I think it's actually rather relevant to hear from Elon Musk, who explains exactly what he believes happened. The media was very angry about this too. He's like, oh, he has no proof. He has no proof. How can he say this? Well, I am familiar with DDoS attacks, and they're not that hard to pull off. In this case, could he have been better prepared? I don't know. I'm not enough of a tech savant, but I'm guessing, given that it was Elon, he was prepared for a lot, just not exactly whatever somebody else decided to send his way. Let's take a listen to his explanation. When he first came on, he explained just exactly what went down.
All right. Hello, everyone. My apologies for the late start. We unfortunately had a massive distributed denial of service attack against our servers, and saturated all of our data lines. Like basically hundreds of gigabits of data were saturated. We think we've overcome most of that, and so it's now time to proceed. But as this massive attack illustrates, there's a lot of opposition to people just hearing what President Trump has to say, and but I'm honored to have this conversation. I want to emphasize it's a conversation, and it's really intended to just get a feel for what Donald Trump is just like in a conversation. It's hard to catch a vibe about someone if you just don't hear them talk in a normal way. And when there's an adversarial interview, like no one's themselves in an adversarial interview. And this is really aimed at kind of open-minded, independent voters who just trying to make up their mind. So you can understand like what is what is it just like to have a conversation. So honored to Donald, great to speak. We had a great conversation yesterday. As you mentioned yesterday, if we could just record that conversation and post it, it would have been excellent. And I hope we can have something like that today.
Well, I think we will. I'm pretty sure we will. And congratulations, because I see you broke every record in the book with so many millions of people, and it's an honor. We view that as an honor. And then you do want silencing of certain voices. Usually those are voices that have something to say that are constructive, oftentimes constructive. And so we have to consider it an honor. But congratulations on breaking every record in the book tonight. That's great.
Well, thank you.
And off they went. I mean, once they finally could. So there's this one account that's not Elon's. I think the title of it is I Am Not Elon. Anyway, they had a funny post. They actually put up something. And I think it's kind of a good question. I think we have it for you. Basically, who do you think is responsible for this? Who do you think? And then they give you choices. It's like a multiple choice question. And, there's the likely players like Iran, for example, Russia, China, Zuckerberg, U.S. deep state, or other. I just thought that was funny. So I'll ask you guys, since it's a live show, what do you pick? A, B, C, D, or E? A is Russia, B is China, C is U.S. deep state, D is Zuckerberg, E is other. Okay, we're going to take a look at those responses from you momentarily. But before we do, I mean, that's a good question, right? That's kind of a funny question. And it was especially funny because ahead of the DDOS attack in the White House that afternoon, there were some very nervous liberal reporters. One reporter in particular, if we can call this person that. I mean, how can you call yourself a reporter or a journalist and ask this question that you're about to hear? This guy is so clearly in the tank for the left. He doesn't even want to honor in any way, shape, or form his own First Amendment. I mean, it's wild that he actually said this. And then even more wild when you hear the answer, which should have been, well, sorry, we have a First Amendment. Anyway, let's go to this clip. It's great.
Elon Musk is slated to interview Donald Trump tonight on X. I don't know if the president is going to tune in. Feel free to say if he is or not. But I think that misinformation on Twitter is not just a campaign issue. It's a America issue. What role does the White House or the president have in sort of stopping that, or stopping the spread of that, or sort of intervening in that? Some of that was about campaign misinformation, but it's a wider thing, right?
Yeah, no, and you've heard us talk about this many times from here, about the responsibilities that social media platforms have when it comes to misinformation, disinformation. Don't have anything to read out from here about specific ways that we're working on it, but we believe that they have the responsibility. These are private companies, so we're also mindful of that too. But look, it is. I think it is incredibly important to call that out as you're doing. I just don't have any specifics on what we have been doing internally as it relates to the interviews, not something that I'm tracking, and I'm sure the president's not tracking.
I don't have any specifics as to what we can do or are doing internally. Oh my goodness. Just the other day, remember I played for you some excerpts from a Zoom call in which you had the Harris-Biden White House tech team talking about how they were going after misinformation, disinformation. I mean, basically, this guy is like, hey, how are you going to censor this? What are you going to do to censor this? And she's like, I don't really have any information on that, but that's a really, really good point. Well, the EU decided to do whatever they could do to censor this. The European Union, this is fantastic here. They came out with a letter here to Mr. Musk, basically saying they were going to sue him if there was any misinformation on the platform. Again, the question becomes, who decides what's misinformation? Because you know what? Under those circumstances, the EU ought to actually sue a lot of people because we got a lot of misinformation fed to us courtesy of none other than the very media that they've sanctioned. I can go back to the 51X spooks. I can go back to Russia, Russia, Russia. I can go back to, the virus came from a wet market. Oh, there's a lot of stuff, right, that we can talk about if we really want to go down that rabbit hole. But that's the European Union. I mean, think about that. That's so scary. I was just over in Europe, and there is one narrative and one narrative only. And it's actually concerning for me. I said to one person, you guys only hear one side of things. I mean, I guess because the whole other side gets sort of taken away. And they're making that very clear to Elon. Hey, we're going to use legal action against you if he says anything that he shouldn't. I mean, of course, he always says things that he, quote unquote, shouldn't, right? But if you actually believe in someone's First Amendment, you also believe in people's right to hear things and people's right to make their own decisions on things. Unlike that reporter, right, who's like, hey, KJP, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? I'm sure she's thinking, there's a lot I want and can do about it. I just can't tell you. Really. It's very strange. I mean, it's one of the reasons, by the way, if you have not signed up for 76research.com, I want you to do this. It's one of the reasons why I created this platform actually for financial research. I look at politics in general through an economic lens. And I look at it through that economic lens because, look, there's money on the line. And the problem with the sort of contortions in the media nowadays is that they're not looking at it through sort of a fair lens, a lens of, okay, what is going to be good for our economy? What is going to help generate wealth for the future? What is going to help keep this nation as the number one economic superpower of the world? And so what we try and do at 76 through our model portfolios is find you the best stocks, given that you also want to kind of allow for not crazy volatility, the best stocks in each of these various sectors that we've chosen. For example, there's an American resilience portfolio that's more growth oriented. And that's designed, and by the way, it's done great, absolutely positively great. I'm so proud of these portfolios, really and truly, all handpicked by Rob and myself. Rob has a background in this. For a couple of decades, he worked on Wall Street, actually picking stocks for mutual funds and ran billions of dollars and was hugely successful. And when he was leaving that, I convinced him to do this with me because I really feel passionately about making sure that you get information that's direct and that's fair. And it is based on trying to help grow your opportunity in the future. So we created 76 Research. There are 3 portfolios there, the American Resilience Portfolio, growth oriented. So, you're going to find your sort of AI plays, not NVIDIA though. I don't want to give too much away, but not NVIDIA because that's such a wild one. And by the way, it's in the S&P. So if you're in the S&P 500, if you're invested in that index, you're going to get NVIDIA. And there's also an inflation protection portfolio, and there's also an income generator portfolio. So for people who really want that sort of steady income as they move into retirement, this is where you need to go. 76research.com. If nothing else, sign up for the free stuff, but look at those model portfolios. You can also sign up for 76 Report, 76report.com, or the 76 Report on 76 Research, where we have a lot of ideas. Actually, I think Rob and I are going to do something on our YouTube channel at 76 Research this week, because there's a brand new piece coming out this afternoon. If you go to 76research.com, sign up for the 76 Report so that you can get this piece. It's all about the AI landscape. And a lot of people are saying, wait a second, is this a bubble? Is it going to be over? And I want you to hear our take on this. I think it's still pretty much a game changer. And this is not the year 2000, but we get into it in quite a bit of detail. And so there's still opportunity there that you should be made aware of and understand. This next clip is fantastic because there's this one reporter over at Fox, Ducey, you may know him, and his dad does the morning show. And I love how he's just taken the administration on. I mean, it's not that hard to do. Let's be clear. KJP, she is what she is. We used to have her on Fox a lot. She was a Fox contributor, and we'd put her on when, sometimes you need a liberal to articulate their viewpoint, but she could never do it all that well. And she always struggled, believe me. And especially on anything economic, which is my sweet spot. Anyway, he kind of outsmarted her with this very, very pointed question. It shows you, if you would, the lack of logic, because he's getting into it here with her over Kamala's southern border. Apparently Kamala is going to redo the whole border thing, which begs the question, what's she been doing for the last nearly 4 years? Watch.
And how long have you guys known that Vice President Harris does not think President Biden is doing a good job at the border?
Wait, say that one more time?
Well, she's now promising to hire thousands more border agents than there are now under President Biden.
Wait, but start your question again.
How long have you guys known that Vice President Harris does not think that President Biden is effective with his border policy?
I mean, that you're making a huge jump. Why she did not say this. This is something that you are assuming. I don't understand why you would assume that. It's not true.
She has a campaign ad where she is saying they need more Border Patrol agents. If President Biden's doing such a good job, why do they need any more border agents?
We both believe that. The president does want more Border Patrol agents. You know who's getting in the way? Republicans in Congress. They're getting in the way. You know who else is getting in the way? The former president, Donald Trump. He's getting in the way. I mean, there's no daylight here. I'm not understanding the question because there's no daylight. The president believes that as well, and he's worked towards doing that. There's a bipartisan, I know you guys probably get sick of me saying this, but there was a bipartisan agreement that was on the table that the president worked through for a couple of months with Republicans in the Senate and Democrats. They were told not to move forward because it would help Joe Biden by the former president. That's their decision.
Woo! Okay, nothing like just blaming your predecessor, right? And blaming the other side. Kamala Harris was the border czar, for goodness sakes. And look at what we're dealing with on the border, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is a big problem. A big problem. And you can't just, dance your way around this one because the numbers are the numbers. Apparently in the last month, they've declined somewhat. Okay, we got that going for us, right? But they hit record highs under the Biden-Harris administration with Kamala Harris as the border czar. I mean, I don't think it gets more obvious than that. Inflation went way up with Biden and Harris. They can sit there and try and point to Trump all they want, but I'm sorry, guys, at some point you got to say the buck stops here, right? Like, we're in charge. We're in control. Why are we having so many border issues? Why are we having such mass inflation? Because of Donald Trump and the Republicans? You're really going to sit there and expect people to believe that? Yeah, they actually are. I mean, that's how whacked out this stuff is. And you want to talk really wacky? You want to talk weird? Kamala Harris has some big plans for day one. So while Donald Trump talks about how he wants to make the border safe and control the border so that we don't have what we got going on right now, Kamala Harris has a very different view of what she's going to do on day one. I want you to hear this. I mean, One of the few times she's actually spoken. And we did get this one on tape. So if you have any doubt about her policy, believe me, she's not interested in controlling more at the border. I mean, she showed us that for the last 3.5 years. And then she said this. Watch.
Hi, my name is Sally Hartman. I'm a volunteer with the Center for Worker Justice. I want to know, when you become president, would you be committing to close immigration detention centers?
Absolutely, on day one. On day one.
You're gonna close all the migration detention centers on day one, lady? Are you kidding me? Does anyone please have a brain? I mean, just from a logistical standpoint, even from a humanitarian standpoint, okay? Like, you know, if I were a super lefty, I wouldn't be too psyched about this move. Closing all the detention centers. What, so you throw people out on the street? I mean, this is weird. This is pathetic. This is not language that should be coming from an intelligent person's mouth. This is Kamala Harris, ladies and gentlemen, who, by the way, will say whatever, apparently, in order to get elected. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that they were really negative on the tips thing, right? Do you remember that? Pretty recently, we're going to have to talk about that because apparently just depends on who puts forward the policy. If Kamala Harris says no tax on tips, great. Donald Trump says it, not so great. So if Donald Trump said, I'm going to close all the detention, well, first of all, he'd never say that. But you know what they would say. They'd say, oh my gosh, that's so inhumane. All those people are going to get thrown out on the streets. But nobody has the common sense to say this about her policy. Her policy is absolutely, positively bonkers. Okay, bonkers. And remember this, ladies and gentlemen, she's been there for 3.5 years. She has been the border czar. And now she wants you to vote for her so she can actually improve the immigration system while simultaneously opening up all the detention centers and letting everyone loose. I love this. The Babylon Bee. If you don't follow them on Twitter, you should, because they just have the most hysterical headlines. Here's one. I will fix things if you vote me into office, says woman currently in office. Why would we trust the woman who has been head of the border, who's had ample time to work on economic policy for the last 3.5 years, and it's resulted in massive inflation? Why would we trust her to continue forward? I mean, I think ultimately, people won't. But the problem you have is that there is this media push, a constant media drive that's like, oh, anything Kamala does is great. Anything Trump does is bad. And there's a phenomenal example of it that's making the rounds on social media. I want to show you this because it really crystallizes how the media, the establishment, elite media think about Kamala versus Trump. So this is by the Twitter account End Wokeness. Great, funny Twitter account, important Twitter account too, because this woman like spots so much stuff. Here you go. Same plan, spot the difference. And so on the one hand, just a couple weeks ago, you have CBS News reporting former President Donald Trump's vow to stop taxing tips would cost the federal government up to $250 billion over 10 years, according to a nonpartisan watchdog group. Okay? Then you go over to what they just reported after Kamala Harris said in Nevada that she would also have no tax on tips. Quote, Vice President, same news organization, by the way, CBS News, same exact thing. Vice President Kamala Harris is rolling out a new policy position saying she'll fight to end taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers. Woohoo! Okay. I guess she deserves a round of applause for that. Donald Trump, you ain't getting that. No. Donald Trump, you're in trouble. You've got a nonpartisan watchdog group saying you're going to cost the economy $250 billion over the next 10 years. Kamala, you are a champion of the worker. Think about that. I mean, that is just a wonderful, wonderful display of the inequity in the media coverage when it comes to Kamala versus Trump. And I think America has to say, okay, look, we've had it. Enough is enough, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting a little tired of the nonstop appreciation for one side and one side only. And it's going to get worse. So there's this big debate that's supposed to be happening in September on ABC News. Donald Trump's actually suing ABC News. He doesn't like them very much, and he's suing them for defamation. George Stephanopoulos, by the way, who's the former Clinton press secretary, who now hosts like the main political show on ABC News, he's suing him too. It turns out that there's a very cozy relationship between Kamala Harris and one of the main executives over at ABC News, which kind of has everybody wondering, how the heck is Donald Trump ever going to get a fair shot in this new debate? So there's this executive, by the way, Disney, right? Remember, this is a Disney company. ABC News is owned by Disney. Disney wants to get rid of it in the worst way, believe me. This is not a moneymaker or a growth opportunity for Disney. They know that. Kamala Harris has extraordinary friendship, this is the headline in Daily Mail, with Disney executive Dana Walden overseeing ABC, which will host her first debate with Trump. So they've known each other, I guess, going all the way back to 1994. They're real pals. I mean, they're such pals that she wouldn't have met Doug. No, he might be the first gentleman. Let's hope not. Doug, the husband Doug. She never would have met Dougie Boy had it not been for Dana Walden introducing them. So that's how far they go back and how good they are friends. So that begs the question, is that really appropriate? I mean, isn't that some kind of conflict of interest of some sort in some way? If you say no, okay, then what can ABC News do to show us that they're not so tremendously biased? Look, I think they've got a couple of good moderators. I know David Muir, and look, he's left like everybody else in the media. But David, I think, will at least try to put on a good front and will try to offer some kind of equality there. The other reporter, I'm not so sure. We briefly overlapped at Bloomberg, and I don't know what her politics are. But I would say that David, while being left, does have some respect for the quote-unquote institution of journalism. That said, we'll see, because this is bigger than David. Don't forget. I mean, this is much, much bigger than any single reporter that's asking questions there on the debate stage. This is going all the way up to his boss, Dana, who's such good friends with Kamala that Kamala wouldn't be married to Doug had it not been for Dana. So think about this bias when you consider what's coming out of the media, and tell your friends. By the way, tell your friends to subscribe, to like, to share. And I want to go back to what you guys think about the attack on Twitter, who may have been responsible for it, right? Because I can see all of your comments here if you're watching on YouTube live in real time. So it's wonderful that you guys are here. Thank you. Thank you for all your support on this program. It's good to be back. You were with me for the last nearly 3 weeks as I was on the road, and I loved tuning in, having so much tune in from these live locations. But it's nice to be back in the studio, right? My hair appreciates it. Especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, wonderful. Thank you for listening on Apple Podcasts. Do us a favor, leave a review, leave 5 stars. If you're doing that on Spotify, if you're listening on Spotify, we so appreciate that as well. So please do me the favor of also going in and leaving a review, leaving the 5 stars. And if you're here, make sure that you make a comment below as well, not just in the live chat, but below as well. I see everyone, Hemi, Arcade, Mike Costa, good to have you back. Red Omaga, Get Cat Crazy, I think you're new. That's a good name, especially these days, right? MJ Cleveland and Willie, thank you so much, everybody. Peace of mind here as well. We got the whole crowd tuning in, which is terrific, absolutely terrific. All right, we got more. You know what? I've had some time to think. I was on the plane, right? Some time to think about what we need to make sure that we get in here for you guys, because as I look again at this sort of drastic approach that the media has, I am really concerned. I mean, have you heard CNN's wild and desperate new theory on why it is that Tim Walz's stolen valor, if you would, is now being so heavily criticized? I mean, it's being criticized because the guy lied. And if you're a vet, you probably don't appreciate that Tim Walz is out there saying he had a higher command post than he did, and that, he took the opportunity to leave when he could have actually gone and fought in war, but then yet had the audacity to come out and say that he had fought, right? I mean, you think about those things as a veteran, that's kind of insulting, to say the least. And so it's important to call attention to it. I mean, he is in politics for what? He's been in politics some 20 some odd years, and nobody's actually really addressed this head on. Well, it's important that it does get addressed. And somehow that's I guess not allowed. Let's take a look at Dana Bash and her comments.
It does seem to actually play into, I mean, the negative framing of this is by itself a contrast between Trump Vance and Harris Walz right now.
No, it absolutely is. The other thing that was striking to me was on Tim Walz's military record. He was not apologetic. He was not backing down on it. They clearly believe that they are onto something here. We had a pretty extended conversation about it, and I was giving him some of the facts, including the Harris campaign saying that Tim Walz misspoke, and the one time that I have seen where he said back in 2018 that he used a weapon of war in war, which he did not do because he was not in an actual war zone, even though he did serve for 24 years. The fact that he continues to seize on that is, I'm not sure if it means that they see something that we don't, or it's just like the thing, as Pete Buttigieg said, it's the exception that sort of defines the rule, that he is kind of hard to attack on a lot of other issues.
Yeah, so
he's hard to attack. So they're going after him on his military source. He's hard to attack. I'm sorry, that kind of seems like a headliner. The guy, he's been in politics all these years, and he's been masquerading as one thing that he's not. That kind of seems like easy pickings to me anyway. Anyway, she seems to think he's really hard to attack, and that's why the media is going after. And the media, by the media, I don't mean them. I don't mean the legacy media, okay? I mean people like me and streamers out there and podcasts and the quote unquote alternative media that I'm very happy to be proud of. Reminder, make sure you subscribe, like, share, make a comment below if you're watching live. That's terrific. Make sure you guys hit the bell too. That way you know when I'm here live every single day. Well, yeah, you know what? We are noticing some of those things like his military service, because let's remember what he said. In clip 23, we've got Tim Walz saying he was deployed to Afghanistan, except wait a second, he wasn't. We'll bring that up for you in just a moment, everyone. So he basically said, look, I was deployed to Afghanistan, and this is something he was saying quite a number of years ago. There's this House hearing, and he said as part of an Operation Enduring Freedom, and he just casually mentions it. Drew, as soon as you have it, just go to it. But he casually mentions this like it's totally, it's part of his bio. And his bio actually is very, very different, because the guy never went to the Middle East, okay? He never actually was in war. So he was never in Afghanistan. So why would he say this? To me, this is something that the media ought to be talking about. I realize Dana Bash and the other like-minded legacy media folks find it somewhat sacrilegious to criticize anything that comes from Kamala Harris or Tim Walz, but this one deserves to be called out. If we have it, let's play it. Apparently not. So I'm going to move on. You know what? Bloomberg thinks that the GOP is terrified of Walz's masculinity. This is a good article. So I'm browsing through on the plane home. I see this thing. Tim Walz's masculinity is terrifying to Republicans. I mean, are you kidding me? Really? I mean, he's got some funny movements which have been called out by, again, some of us in the non-legacy media. But this one, Kamala Harris's running mate, has traditional manly man traits. He's also not frightened of women, afraid of Black people, or terrified of the future. Oh my goodness. So this is an opinion columnist over at Bloomberg. But again, don't forget, I think it's Bloomberg. All right. I used to work there. And the owner of the entire news division has his own point of view, shall we say. He, by the way, cannot stand Trump. Absolutely positive. I mean, he told me. I'll give you a quick story, guys. Do you remember when Donald Trump bought the post office? in Washington, D.C. Well, he invited all the media to come. And this would have been, we're going back to probably, I want to say 2014, maybe 2015 at most. So anyway, he bought the post office and they had a big ribbon cutting ceremony. And there are hundreds and hundreds of reporters there. And he made a point. I didn't really care. I didn't have to go first. But he made such a point of making sure that Trish Regan had the first interview out of the hundreds of reporters that were there. And he said to me, it wasn't really about me, it was about my boss, which was Mike Bloomberg. He said, would you please tell Mike, please tell your boss that I said hi? And, he clearly was very enthusiastic about Mike Bloomberg. Well, of course, the next day I got back to work and I told Mike, hey, Donald Trump says hi. And you should have heard the series of 4-letter words out of his mouth. I kid you not. And he would have no problem with me telling that story because he would still give you those 4-letter words, if you would, right out of his mouth. He does not like Trump. He never has. And so this column doesn't surprise me. A lot of what they put forward there is, again, extraordinarily biased. But if you ask me, I think it's fair game. I mean, the guy lied about his military service, and that actually needs to be addressed. The other thing is this assumption that somehow all Republicans are really evil, that they're somehow enormously racist and sexist and transphobic and this, that, and the other. Here's the deal. There was a new study, actually, Elon Musk just retweeted this study, a new study that just came out showing that actually, white Americans are like the least racist group of all. The least. I thought that was actually heartening because that's certainly what I think. And I think people that believe in a real meritocracy and believe in real opportunities, and it doesn't matter, what you look like, who you are, if you're a good person and you are able and willing to do the job and help everyone get ahead, that's a good thing. And so that's when you actually see beyond color. But in this crazy, mixed up, upside down world, no, you're supposed to see color first. I mean, I'm done for them because I never said, I really, really don't. I just don't. I actually don't think Trump sees it the way they insinuate he does. Granted, he's a different generation than me, but, I thought Soledad O'Brien was Irish for the longest time. She's a former CNN anchor. And you know what? She is half Irish. And if she wants to identify as Irish, fine. But you know what? I don't see whatever it is and it's probably just because I'm Irish, right? So I'm seeing what I want, perhaps in some way, I don't know, but I just don't think Americans are as viciously awful as they suggest we are. And it's concerning, it's disappointing, but it's this reality. It really is painful and difficult to see, but that's where we are right now. I want to move on actually back to a topic that we were talking about earlier, which was KJP and how flustered she's been lately. Oh my goodness. I mean, she's always flustered. I've known her many years. She was always flustered. We used to put her on TV on Fox. She was kind of cute and soft-spoken and always flustered. So she got really flustered when she was asked about this whole no tax on tips, because the reporter's like, wait a second. This was Trump's idea. Why is Kamala stealing Trump policy ideas? Well, wait till you hear what she had to say. Let's cue this one.
Yeah. Trump was the first to endorse eliminating taxes on tips. He's accusing Vice President Harris of stealing his idea. So did she get this idea from Trump?
Look, I'm not going to respond to a presidential candidate. I think their campaign could speak to that directly. What I can say is this president, this vice president have always had the backs of the working people, always. And you see that in the policies that they put forward. Everything that we have put forward, historic pieces of legislation that are obviously now laws, are helping middle-class workers, are helping people in different communities that are normally, again...
I literally almost choked on my water when she said they're helping middle-class workers. Oh my goodness. I mean, this, like I said, she's always been flustered, but that's just a real lie. I mean, that's the tough thing about that job. Ladies and gentlemen, I could never do that job because I could never, ever lie. I'm really just, what you see is what you get. Sometimes too much, right? I get myself in trouble a lot because I just say exactly what I think. And in that job, you have to lie nonstop. And she's not necessarily the best liar. I mean, the other one, right? Peppermint Patty, she was a good liar, which tells you something else entirely. I mean, look at what she's spinning these days over on MSNBC. Again, she went to MSNBC. They all wind up in the media. How crazy is that? The media is all coming out of politics. It's really, really bad. So even if they wanted to have some semblance of independence, they're not going to have it. No, they've already established where they are. We used to think it was a big deal when George Stephanopoulos, he was at ABC News, and that was really sketchy that they took somebody from the Clinton White House to run such a major political program. But this is what they're doing everywhere. So the mainstream media is basically an arm of the Democrat Party. And you guys get me and other folks like me over here that are trying to do this in an independent way where we don't have to answer to anyone. So please make sure you subscribe. Please make sure you share this. Tell your friends. Trish is there live every single day. You can watch on repeat as well. The West Coast repeat, as we would call it. But Karine Jean-Pierre, it really has no explanation for why it is that Kamala would steal a policy. But here's the thing. Trump actually has policies. Let's start with that, right? Hallelujah. The guy's got some policies. What do you know? He's got like 20 of them. He put them all right out there for you to see on like Kamala Harris's website, right? Number one, seal the border and stop the migrants from coming in. He also says that he would actually do the antithesis of what Kamala's proposing. Remember, I showed you the soundbite earlier where she said, hey, I'm going to open up all the detention centers on day one. Well, he is trying to carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. And 3, this is really important. I might have put this in as number 1. End inflation. Make America affordable again. It's so important. The list goes on and on and on. Let's go to the next page because there's 20 of these things. So he's got 10 more on the next page. Number 20 is to unite our country by bringing it to new record levels of success, right? Because how do you unite? You grow the pie for everyone. This is really, really important. So he's got his policies out there. Kamala, we don't know. We're getting glimpses here and there and everywhere. She's stealing some of Trump's ideas. I guess that's a good thing, right? She's stealing some of his ideas. But in actuality, she's not offering up much. Now and then, we get a little inkling, like her plan to reduce the population. That's for real. That's for real. I'm going to get to that in a second. But as you look through these top 20 lists, a lot of them, I think, make a lot of sense. A lot of sense. I mean, he talks about energy policy. He talks about inflation. You know what else makes a lot of sense? Our friends over at the Heritage Foundation have something called Project 25, and it's gotten just brutally attacked by all sides, okay, in the media, and it's not fair. It's really, really not fair. Because when I look at the pillars of this project, they are very, very strong and very good. And they're talking about America's resilience through our energy, right? That we need all the energy we can get. You can't just shut off one source of energy because you want to immediately switch everything to EVs. And by the way, there's other downsides that come with that. They talk about the importance of having a stable economy because you can't have all this inflation. They talk about the importance of educating our kids. I mean, you want to take issue with that, educating our kids? This is the truth about the project. And I'd encourage you, it's a good group, and they've got some fantastic ideas that I don't get it. I'm like, where's the controversy, folks? Where's the controversy? Don't you want to be successful? Well, some people don't. Anyway, go to project2025.org. Actually, you can also go, this is even easier. I'll give you an easier one. 25truth.com. 25truth.com. Remember that. We're going to fix this for tomorrow. So it just says 25truth.com. This is Project 2025, but go to 25truth.com and get the truth about what they're trying to do, because it's not fair. It's not right, but they control the majority of the media. And that's what's so scary. So Kamala Harris has not been incredibly revealing of all her policies, but she did let this one slip maybe about a year ago. She has a big idea for how we can get more green, shall we say, and we can do that through population, hindrance, a reduction in the population. I mean, I listened to this and I'm like, wait a second. Are we going to be in like this kind of one child only thing like China was one day? I mean, this is scary talk from somebody who's not very smart, and someone told her something about, oh, you want more green air to breathe. You just need less people. Woo! Listen.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
Less children. Okay, so she wants less children. Well, I guess she's doing her part. She doesn't have any children. Now, I don't know. I mean, maybe there were some special circumstances surrounding. I'm not going to judge her personal life, but she doesn't have any children. And then she's getting up there on stage and saying, we need less children. I actually think we need more children. I mean, if you want your economy to grow, you actually need more children, Kamala. You do. I mean, China's figuring this out kind of the hard way. Japan's certainly figuring this out the hard way. Their older population is too significant. And if we're not careful and thoughtful, we're going to have some real problems. And yet there's an agenda there. They want less children. Oh, is that why they're so encouraging of, you don't know what gender you are, and anyone can have a baby, male or female? I mean, is it in part to somehow weirdly reduce the population? I wonder about that, because I really fail to understand the logic here. Why would you want a smaller population, Kamala? Less people to control? This is going to be a problem. A big problem for the left. Already, what you're seeing in many urban areas is that people are having less children. And if they do have children, they're getting the heck out of there as fast as they can. And now the left is starting to wake up to this. So there was a big, big article in The Atlantic, very leftist magazine, written by a very leftist journalist. I don't even like calling them journalists. I mean, can we call them journalists? I don't think it's a good idea to call these folks journalists, because they're really not journalists. They're opinion makers. Anyway, this big article actually admitted the problem that we have. And the problem is that too many people, too many families are leaving urban environments. These families are leaving. Why? Because of crime, because of costs, because of lack of education. So what's that going to do? Oh, AOC, I don't know if everybody's going to keep voting for you because they're leaving Queens. If you got kids, you're getting the heck out. Or if you're thinking about having kids, you're getting the heck out. Or maybe you're living there and you're just not having kids, which means eventually that population is going to have a dwindle. Maybe they'll get more green areas and blue skies so that Kamala Harris can roam the streets and soak it all in. This is the article. The urban family exodus is a warning for progressives. In large urban metro areas, the number of children under 5 years old is in a free fall, writes Derek Thompson. This is a lot for them to publish. Take a look at this. 18% decline in population in New York City. Isn't that amazing? Just in the last 5 years. Overall, in urban areas, it's down 8%. 5% nationwide, but urban areas down 8%. So people are having less children, which is a problem. And then you go to New York City, you're down 18%. Where was it hitting the most? In Manhattan and in Queens. So people who have options are taking those options, or just not having kids. I mean, either way, is this good? In neither situation. I mean, you want young families, right? In Manhattan. I'm one of those families that left. I wasn't going to stay in Manhattan. We got out, let me think. I wish I'd gotten out way earlier. I didn't know any better, I guess, initially. But we were there until about 2015 or 2016. And I'd gone to college there, and I had lived there my entire life. And I'll just say this, you know what? It is a drastically different place. And it's very sad to see New York City today. I was just overseas, and some Europeans were saying to me, there was a woman from London who was working at the Shelbourne Hotel where I was in Dublin, very historic hotel, had a big role in Ireland's independence. And she said, I've always wanted to go to New York City. And I'm like, okay, just be careful when you do. You can plan that trip, but you might want to be a little bit careful because its crime rate has gone up so significantly. And when I go there now, when you see the challenges that they're facing in the streets every day. And I go back a lot, because the kids have an appointment or this, that, or the other, or I do something for work. I do go there a lot. And I'm definitely on edge in a way that I never had to be in years past. It started deteriorating, let's face it, under de Blasio. I mean, politics aside, bring Bloomberg back, for goodness sakes. You had Giuliani, you had Bloomberg. This was a continuation of support for the police and this idea that you needed a safe environment, because when you have the safe environment, it allows all these other things to prosper and to flourish. But that's gone in New York today. It really, really, really is. And it's a tragedy. But, it's expensive too. It's not cheap to live in New York City. And I think families start to realize this. I keep saying over and over again, you got to think about how you're approaching this. We got some PPI numbers out today showing that, inflation's abating a little bit, but don't forget, it's been going up, and away for so long. And tomorrow, of course, we're going to get the CPI number. So I'll have coverage of that with you, the Consumer Price Index. But a little earlier, I sat down with the CEO of American Heart for Gold, one of our proud sponsors on the show, to talk all about the reasons why we're seeing gold climb into new highs. What's really driving this? He explains. We talk about gold nearly every day on this program, and we've been watching it go up, and away. We got a lot going on now with the central bank, with inflation, with central banks all over the world, actually, looking to get into gold. I'm thrilled to have back on the program Max Baker. He is the president of American Heart for Gold, one of our proud sponsors that we have here on the Trish Regan Show. Max, good to see you.
Great to see you, as always.
So, inflation is here to stay. I just saw an article crossing my desk the other day that India has bought more gold than ever before. We see nations around the world in this sort of great divide, having just come off NATO, et cetera, in the big meeting with Russia trying to pull away, with China trying to pull away, with India trying to pull away. There was a photograph of Modi and Putin recently embraced. I mean, all of this, I think, is contributing to the rise in gold prices that we're seeing now. I guess I would just ask you what everybody's wondering. Can it continue?
Yeah, as long as they continue to print money the way that they are, the price of gold will continue to rise. And that's why you're seeing that central banks are buying it up left and right. They know that they're debasing their fiat currency right now. With all this printing, and there's certainly no plans to corral spending by any major government. They're all ramping up to print even more. So as long as that continues, you're going to continue to feel inflation.
Wow. What about the reality that gold is priced effectively in dollars, and we may be looking at more rate cuts before we see rate hikes? I mean, given sort of the inclination, we'll see how this all plays out with the Federal Reserve. But in light of that, what does that also mean for gold prices?
Yeah, gold prices typically rise during a rate cut cycle, just because the cost of holding interest-bearing assets then decreases. So gold should make out pretty well if they begin cutting rates, and that's where you're seeing gold up over $2,400. There's thinking that coming up here in September they're going to begin cutting rates, and so you saw a pretty good little pop in the gold price today, about 2%.
Yeah. What do you make of this sort of great divide, if we could call it that seems to be going on between the Western world and everybody else? And, I was just looking at some numbers, and I'm sure there's more recent data, but I saw that in the first quarter alone, you had record numbers of central banks around the world purchasing gold. The U.S. is still the biggest holder of gold at Fort Knox. But nonetheless, the fact that so many other countries now are trying to do this, it just makes me wonder what sort of, in a more broader tone, right? Like this is sort of outside just the pure gold thing, but what's really going on?
Sure. So gold will give you control, and that's what these governments are realizing. You know, as with dollar as world reserve currency right now, you saw what happened when the Russia-Ukraine war started off. There were sanctions put in place by our government towards Russia, and you had a lot of other countries kind of, look at that and say, hey, if we're kind of at the mercy of the dollar, that's an issue. And, not to say that we're an adversary of some of these countries. We aren't. We're allies of some of these countries that are buying gold. But they realized right then and there that we don't want to be at the mercy of any other country except for our own. And if we're having to deal with the dollar as world reserve currency, we want to change that, move into something that's, we have control over, which is physical gold.
No, it totally makes sense. In fact, I think it makes sense from that perspective. Even, if you think about individuals that are trying to diversify their own investment holdings, one of the things that they look at, and actually I happily encourage. I mean, I say that I don't, I'm nobody's money manager, but I do have certain core beliefs, and one of them is diversification. And part of the diversification strategy includes having some exposure to gold. But when you really drill down, even on that, like walk me through the ways you can do that, because you can buy the physical gold, which comes with certain advantages. Perhaps, you got to deal with storing it, et cetera. Or you could go do an ETF. But one of the reasons, and I'll let you get at this, but I think one of the reasons you are buying gold is because if the you-know-what hits the fan, you know what? You want to be able to make sure that you're protecting that underlying asset that was there for diversification in the first place. And what is the challenge with, say, counterparty risk, ETFs, et cetera, versus the physical stuff?
That's a great question. It's a question we get asked a lot. A gold-backed IOU is still an IOU. Until you have the gold in your hand, you don't really own it. And you mentioned counterparty risk. That's really everything. Gold has value all around the world. If you have gold in your hand, you can go anywhere in the world and that has value. There's zero counterparty risk there. If you have a gold-backed ETF, if you got to hope that someone is there to buy that ETF from you. You got to hope that the currency that they convert it into is still relevant. You got to hope that the bank that they're putting into is still in business. You got to hope that you can access those funds when you need those funds. You see, there's multiple layers of counterparty risk. There's 3-4 layers there that, the whole point of gold is having an insurance policy. And if you're having to go through 4, 5, 6 layers of counterparty risk to get some value, that's an issue.
Hey everyone, I'm Trish Regan, and so happy to be coming to you live all week long from the stunning island of Ireland. Just incredible. When I was a little kid and we'd visit here, my mom would say, if you're lucky enough, you might actually get a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, because that's where the leprechauns leave it. So we looked, we didn't find any, but I consider it probably having been good advice, because as I got older, I learned that gold is pretty valuable. It's valuable in terms of diversification. I encourage you to take a look at it. And when you do, call our friends, our wonderful sponsors over at American Hartford Gold. You can go to trishlovesgold.com, Trish Loves Gold, and wow, it's windy here. You can text 65532, my name, Trish, to 65532 for your chance to get up to $15,000 in free silver, ladies and gentlemen. Just a terrific offer. Yeah, and I look at gold, I guess, not necessarily as something I'm trading in and out of, but as one of those parts or pillars, if you would, in a portfolio that's there for the long term, right? So it's not like, okay, it hit $2,300, I'm out. I'm like, actually, I wish I bought more of it because it just hit 2,300. Yeah. But the reality becomes, okay, this is part of my core holdings, et cetera. That's sort of, the plan if all HELL breaks loose, which we certainly hope doesn't happen. But I'm sorry, increasingly, when you look at what's going on in the world these days, it gives you reason to have a bit of a pause. So I guess, look, if you were quickly trading in and out, maybe you'd want the liquidity perhaps of an ETF. But I suspect a lot of the reasons why people are buying gold in the first place is to protect against that black swan event.
That's right. As the insurance policy to have as the diversifier, the hedge in their portfolio that stays there, and it's really the insurance policy. It's a benefit right now because it's performing very, very well. Gold's near the all-time high. It's up 35% since Joe Biden took office. So typically, your insurance policy should just be a good hedge, but it's actually making a nice return over the past couple of years.
Yeah, you know what's great about it too, in that, you said it's up about 35%. I mean, you look at inflation, which is up somewhere around 33%. So, I mean, one of the points I like to make is that you have to actually allocate for this inflation risk, and we've had a lot of it. The other thing is that and I've showed you this chart before, I've showed the viewer this chart before, because we talk about gold a lot, regardless of you guys, by the way. Again, we're thankful for your sponsorship, and you guys have a great offer. So I want to get into silver in just a second and ask you about that. But in light of gold having all this upside, people say, can it continue? It's one of the things you and I have talked about, but I've looked at these charts and it shows you, for example, gold versus the overall money supply. And back when gold had a more challenging time, you had a gold price that was pretty high relative to the overall money supply, right? Like how much money they've actually printed. And now you look at that and they're pretty dead even. So that tells me that it's a more fair valuation. If you look at a Fed that's going to cut rates again and we're going to have more liquidity injected, who knows, then I would suspect, to your point earlier, you would see an expected upside in gold that would at least help you keep pace with inflation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's going to be a nice upside as they begin this rate cut cycle. And there's a lot of unknowns, as you mentioned earlier. In normal times, I'd say pre-COVID, there may be like one or two things to worry about. And right now we have 12 to 15 things to worry about in terms of war and in terms of the debt that we're running up, in terms of the upcoming election. There's just a lot of things on the radar that are a big unknown that, I read countless articles every day just trying to make sense of it. And it seems that even the smartest people in the world have no idea what's going to happen over the next year.
Yeah. Hey, and you're running a gold company.
Right. Exactly.
But no, there's a lot of things out there in the world right now. I mean, you look obviously at the political situation being in such dire shape. Someone said to me the other day, if Donald Trump doesn't win the election, they expect gold to just soar, because the expectation then is like, okay, what happened? What happened if he, I don't even need to go there with you right now. I think that it's important as an investor, however, to look at all of the political events through this economic lens, and that kind of helps dictate where you want to be putting your money. And I think that the risk scenario, it's real. It's certainly real from a global perspective, from a let's print more money perspective, let's spend more money, obviously, and print more money. The spending to GDP is unlike anything we've ever seen. And we're not actually in a wartime on top of it all, right? I mean, it's going to pay off kids' college loans that may or may not have graduated.
Yeah, last time it was WW2 that was at these levels, and as you said, we're not really in a major war unless you count, Ukraine, Russia, and what's going on in Israel. But we're not in a major global war, so
it's not us though, right? Technically,
yeah.
I mean, who knows? Yeah. I hear some things about we're sending this, that, and the other over there, but it's technically not us. So that's kind of alarming. And then, look, I'm a big believer in a lot of Trump's policies, but I can't tell you that he's not going to keep spending or, put some pressure on the Fed, as he's literally said to me, they need to cut rates when he was in office. So not that, I get that there's a Chinese wall, et cetera, but I look at the scenario and I think there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there. In terms of making us weaker on the inflationary front. What about silver? Let me ask you this, because just a quick plug for American Heart for Gold. You can go to Trish Loves Gold. Nobody's going to forget that. TrishLovesGold.com and check out this offer, because you can get up to $15,000 in free silver, up to, if you sign on with them, which is obviously really tremendous. But let me ask you, what is it about silver now that's driving silver prices higher? Because is it being used sort of as a proxy for gold?
Silver is always a little slower to react, compared to gold. And we're seeing it get right back in line with where it needs to be with the gold price. Silver's up 50% since October. So it's catching up in a hurry right now. It's been undervalued for so long. And now we're heading to a place where, the inflation's finally caught up with the price. What's going on with the two wars is catching up, election uncertainties, and then just monetary supply. Typically, it has the industrial use. But now with everything going on, it's taken on more of the currency use, like gold has, is more of a hedge, more as a safe haven. So now that it's turned into more of the safe haven aspect, you're seeing it run up and catch up to gold.
Do you have any expectation? I mean, we got some rather more encouraging, I guess you could say, inflation numbers, although I think it's really amazing how everybody has amnesia about how this stuff adds on top of each other. So, hey, look, even if it's up 3%, it was up however much before, and however much before, you can go back to the 9.1%, right? That it was up 15 months after Joe Biden became president of the United States. And so all of this stuff is cumulative. But is there anything that sort of makes you think, I mean, not me, but I mean, I hope it's not 9%, but I don't feel like we've got it under control yet. Your thoughts?
Yeah, great question. Look, again, as long as they're continuing to print money, Joe Biden came out with this $7 trillion plan. He says, if I get reelected, we're going to do this, that, and the other. They certainly have no plans of cutting spending. And as you said, the money supply has a direct correlation to the price of gold and inflation. And as long as they continue to print, we're going to see inflation run wild. Right now, it has tamed a little bit. It's getting closer to 3%. The Fed wants 2%. But it is one of those things that begins to snowball, that now the cat's out of the bag with the money printing. They're going to keep printing money. You're going to have to, as an employer, you're going to have to raise wages. Wages increase. Then they're going to have to charge more. If you charge more, then that's inflation. So you're going to continue to see this cycle that cost of living is going up and up and up. Wages have to increase, and it's kind of a push-pull. It's going to keep happening as that cycle continues. Inflation is going to continue to stick around, and that's why the Fed has struggled to really get it under control, because all the money is still out there in the system, still in circulation. And people are certainly struggling to make ends meet. So employers are having to raise wages as wages increase. Obviously, consumers need to feel that, and there's your inflation.
Yeah, look, people are hurting. I mean, I get a lot of messages on the show about, look, my grocery bill used to be this, and now I'm paying that once a week. And,
sure,
it's the reality. And so I think when the administration tries to say, hey, we're doing great, and they point to a bunch of gobbledygook, it's like, no, you're not doing great. Just like, by the way, Joe Biden is not in perfect cognitive shape. Like, I don't think I'm going out on a limb saying that. But likewise with the economy, I don't think the economic policy that they've employed has had any success in terms of making life better for your average American. Don't forget, that is the intention, right? The Federal Reserve theoretically had good intentions, but do you think the Federal Reserve is just inherently messed up? And that as a society, I mean, hey, they want at least 2.5% inflation, right? They're even already saying, hey, maybe you got to get used to interest rates around 5% for the foreseeable future. I mean, it just makes the cost of capital so much higher. It makes the cost of everything so much higher. It makes inflation go into overdrive. Is the Federal Reserve sort of misguided in your estimation? I love to pick on the Fed because they're an easy target, but I just don't understand how on earth they could be looking at maybe cutting rates again when we are confronting a real problem.
That's really well said. 2008, we were behind the 8 ball. We had to cut interest rates down to 0, and we got addicted to this low rate environment and this quantitative easing. And ever since 2008, we haven't been able to pull away from it. And so, we're looking at 5% interest rates right now. That's typically been the norm. And so for people to say, oh, the rates are so high, this, that, and the other, that's been, a historic norm. And the Fed has missed the mark. They're calling inflation transitory for a long time. And it's been here to stay. It's been sticking. It's been hurting Americans. And so it seems that the Fed's always just a little bit behind, or a day later, a dollar short. And, my tinfoil hat theory, I believe the government does like inflation to an extent because it makes the debt worth less. You need to debase the currency to a point because it makes all the money that we printed, in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s worth less and less. So if I can make the dollar worth less, then I can continue to print more and more and more of it. And, it makes,
I think that's actually really important what
impact.
you just said. And I want to just take a quick second and expand upon that because that is, frankly, by the way, why all these central banks are also, not just because they want independence, but they're also recognizing, wait a second, the U.S. can just inflate itself out of debt. How do you like that, China? We don't have to default. We'll just deflate ourselves, out of this debt. So it'll be worth effectively less, but there's more of it. Walk me through why that's bad for everyone else. I mean, I think it's bad for us too.
Sure. A lot of times wages don't keep up at the same pace with that inflation. So, dollars worth less. I see people that are like, oh, my stocks are doing so great. I'm up, 10%, I'm up 20%. I'm like, well, inflation's up over 30% in the last 4 years. So if you're doing the math on that, you're not really up, you're actually down. And so, the typical wages aren't keeping pace with inflation. And so middle America is really feeling it. The government's getting their way. They're making the debt worth less by printing more and more and more. I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You're printing money and increasing the debt, but you're making the debt worth less because of the effects of inflation. But your typical, consumer, your typical middle America going to the grocery store, they're seeing prices increase like crazy, and their wages, they maybe haven't gotten a raise at work in, a couple of years. So you're feeling the brunt of that.
And it's why I keep saying to everybody, you know what? Like, I don't care. I know it's tough. I know times are tight, but you got to make an effort to invest. I just want to remind everybody, you can text my name, Trish, to 65532 or call 1-844-495-1115 because they do have a really special offer. You can get up to $15,000 in free silver by signing on with American Heart for Gold. Max Baker, thank you so much for your insight. It's really good to see you. And again, text Trish, 65532. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, Trish.
Again, our thanks to Max and the entire team there at American Heart for Gold. Go to trishlovesgold.com. So I'm back. It was a fantastic trip. I had an opportunity to reconnect with so many members of my family, some of whom I had not seen since I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, over in a very small town in southeastern Ireland. Just incredible. A town called Ring. And I'm so thankful to have had that opportunity and that time. All that said, I'm very, very happy to be back in the good old USA and to have a little bit more room. It was, 3 weeks, the kids in a hotel room. So it's good to spread out a little bit and be back at home base. And it's good to be back in the studio, right? The studio. My tricky studio. It's amazing I can get this technology together. It actually is really, Drew is a big part in that and a few other folks as well. But we're so committed to this. I'm so committed to this. I mean, I did not want to take a single day off, all vacation. I'm like, no. There's news. And, I'm wired that way. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, make sure you share. I'm a news reporter. I always have been. I grew up with a news reporter. My mom was a reporter for the Boston Globe. And so we always talked about news. And you know what? We did talk about the importance of a journalist having an open mind and being willing to listen to all sides. And I think the most frustrating thing for me is seeing a deterioration really in the craft, because there's only one side. Maybe there's always only been one side. I mean, let's be honest, right? At least since I've been alive. I started my career in, first at Bloomberg, but then at CBS News. And certainly this is what I've seen throughout all the places I've worked. Maybe CNBC was a little bit better because, they kind of needed to hope for the market to go higher, and the market's not really going to go higher, and things aren't going to get better if you have socialist style policies in place. But in terms of what has happened to journalism, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this moment in time. It's just so freaking obvious, right? I mean, for goodness sakes, you took the guy out. You took Biden out right from under, and now you're crowning her. And you're all excited about these polls. And, she's showing momentum. I'm like, because you put her there, okay? So I think we all need to take a deep breath. I think people need to be realistic. You really like the way things have gone over the last 3.5 years? I don't think so. And so ultimately, I think Trump is able to pull ahead here. I think he's able to get the electoral votes that he needs. And that's why, as we began the show, I pointed to some polls where he is ahead. So he needs to lean into this. This economic stuff is lousy under this lady. Okay. She said 3.5 years. The border's lousy under this border czar. So own that. Also, quick shout out for 76research.com. Make sure you go there. We have a big piece. It just came out this afternoon all about AI and whether or not AI is sort of overblown? Is this like the tech bubble, or is this for real? And there's a very definitive point of view. Rob and I spent a lot of time on it. There's even a reference to Ireland right off the top. So make sure you go to 76research.com and sign up for our research. Sign up for the 76 report. Make sure you do that. And then if you're somebody who's interested in investing, and I encourage everybody, I mean, compound interest. You know what? I got to do something this week on that. I want to show you. I was looking for the kids because we try to help them save for their future. They're little right now, but it's the value of compound interest, right? So you put a little bit away and that stuff adds up in time. And so even if you've only got 5 years, even if you've only got 10 years, you need to start doing it every single day. I have a little trick with myself. I'm like, okay, if I'm willing to go spend that money on getting a bite out to eat or some sort of nonsensical thing, I ought to be willing to spend that money on investing in myself, right? So think about your spending really carefully and think about how you can start to put a little bit away for your future, because this stuff matters. And when you do, let us be there to help guide you and show you what the opportunities are at 76research.com. I will see you right back here live on the show tomorrow. We got the CPI report coming out. The Democrats have some little party they're looking forward to. We're going to talk about all of it right here on the Trish Regan Show. Make sure you subscribe, like, share.